Welcome back. Thank you for joining us on the county seat. Today we are continuing our conversation on public lands bill from left to right. Those on radio can't really see this, but hear it. Randy Johnson. Say hi, Randy.
Hello, the grandfather.
Mike McCandless. And say something, Mike.
This is Mike McCandless.
And Ray Peterson. Gentlemen, thank you. Oh, Ray, say something.
Good to be here. Good
okay,
program.
Very good. Now everybody's got the voices down.
Thank you.
We will continue our conversation. You talked about 176, and it had an impact on your process. And the legislature also passed House Bill 148. Governor signed that one as well. That is challenging, I mean, simply put, it's challenging the federal government's right to continue to hold title to so much of the state of Utah, and is asking for a remedy to that. What's your take on that?
Well, you know, there are a number of things that you think of when you talk about 148, and in terms of the bill itself, there are two or three things that come up. Number one is it going to be declared unconstitutional, and of course that's something that will be determined as it runs along. Certainly the Legislative Council folks said they did not think it was, and that it would have problems. Number two would be, can we get the congressional part of it done and, you know, tie it all together to make it work, and how long will that take if it's not unconstitutional? And then number three would be, what kind of a manager is the state going to be? You know, are they going to sell a lot of this land to raise revenue? And if that's the case, then do we have all these playgrounds on public lands where we've gone that suddenly has a private owner that's put up a gate on roads that you're used to? I mean, so many things play into this that are a little bit unclear that there's a lot of conversation about that bill. But from Emery County's perspective and the perspective of the counties that are engaged in this process, it's certainly not a threat to what we're trying to do. If this bill were to succeed over the next few years, we're confident that the work that has been done in Emery County would pass the scrutiny of the state as managers as well. In other words, if the state becomes the manager of those lands, they would have to evaluate what lands were special as well and where minerals should go. And we believe that our process stands up to scrutiny under any manager, whether it be federal or state or anyone else.
Well, wouldn't the fact that House Bill 176 is also in place,
Yeah.
that would almost be a, well, see, you said this was good.
Yeah.
I mean,
I hadn't thought of that, but I think, yeah, certainly that would give it strength. And then the other part of it is, let's say this, you know, languishes or is not constitutional or whatever else, and for years nothing happens, and we remain under the same umbrella of uncertainty and, you know, changes in administrations and all the other things we've dealt with for decades. Emery County's moved forward. They have certainty, and they're where they want to be. So whatever comes out of 148, we feel like we're in a better position than we are right now.
The fact remains the land needs to be managed. It's going to be managed by somebody. The wisdom of the Public Lands Council has been grassroots, and let's talk to the people that are out there on the ground and utilize that wisdom, generations of wisdom as to how best to do that. So regardless of whether it's the federal government or the state or someone else managing it, that tool can, in fact, 148 calls to create a land use council.
That's right.
I believe is the term.
Yeah.
Same idea that we've got in place to do that. So we would be participating regardless of whether it flies or it doesn't. So providing information, being proactive, grassroots up in the management of that land.
It's really just part of the probing and finding those best ways to be able to manage these lands. I mean, keep in mind, too, the state has also launched their 18,000 road lawsuit process as well. You know, does that fly in the face of our bill or the 148? I mean, there's just a lot of strategies right now that are in play. I mean, we still have a lawsuit through the State Attorney General's office on 6 roads in Emery County, plus the 18,000, plus the new HB 148, plus 176. Really, all of them are just kind of probing to find a way to be able to deal with the issues that we've got. And what we have really focused in is our bill because we think it fits us best. But there are certainly going to be experiences and groups that are going to be very supportive of this effort to be able to take this land from the federal government because of some of the inability they've had for a century in working with the federal land manager. So, I mean, we support the concept, but it doesn't preempt us from our obligation to manage the land we have within our county. I'm also the county planner. We have to deal with planning and zoning issues today. We had to, as a part of this process, adopt the recommendations from Ray's groups into our general plan. So we just amended our general plan in Emery County. The majority of that document was actually directly out of the work that Ray's office did.
And if based on FLTMA, the Federal Lands Policy Management Act, I'm trying to get the acronyms out here, if things were operating as they supposedly should have from FLTMA over the last 3 decades, that planning and zoning document would have set the guideline for how the county is managed anyway,
correct,
according to FLTMA, but it just somehow has fallen apart where planning has been dictated back to the counties instead
We
of
feel we
FLTMA.
have to stay consistent, and so when Randy was commissioner, they amended the general plan at that time to fit in with the planning process they were doing with that legislation. We had the same obligation with this go-around. So we had a concurrent process that my staff was working on general plan change and coordinating that with Ray and the Public Lands Council so that we implement what we say we're going to do. So that forces us to do what we're not just saying, here, Congress, we hope it works out. No, we're actually going to live by this, by general plan changes. That's a big difference than just throwing out lawsuits and hoping something sticks, or throwing out some legislation that may be 5 or 10 years down the road.
One thing I'd like to talk to this effort now, this isn't a new idea, 148. I'm old enough, Randy's is also
Way
to
old
remember Sagebrush
Oh, yeah,
Rebellion
sure.
1.
Well,
of course.
unfortunately, I hate to tell you, I'm
And-
old enough to remember it.
I was making an assumption. But yeah, this isn't new, and regardless of how you feel about how effective the federal land managers have been or the legality of that, it's going to be a tough deal to change that. Over a century of practice and federal Supreme Court lawsuits have come down to support current management and current practice with the federal government. So it's going to be tough. As good as it sounds, whether it'll fly or not, I think it's going to be a tough fight.
Yeah.
Our land managers right now are really more concerned about who's going to sue them than they are about the interest of the land. So we've had a real fight. You know, when we had experiences where that's the first thing they look at rather than what is the best. Our little Buckhorn Information Center, we had agreements from both SUA and the OHV communities to support that effort. The comment from the BLM was, who's going to sue us then? And he was serious because that's how they manage. They expect lawsuits to come. Well, that's not the way to manage lands. And so our effort is really to find a way that we can avoid those kinds of management forces.
Does that really preclude that from happening? Because there are this...
You mean what,
This
HB 148?
Well, your land bill.
Our land bill.
Yeah, because in Washington County, the land bill is passed. It's been federally mandated, but there's still rumblings from certain environmental groups that they're not happy with it and that they may challenge some of it. I mean, I haven't seen anything happen yet, but that conversation's still there, and suits are awfully easy to file.
It's much harder to challenge an act by Congress than it is to challenge a planning process or something by the BLM. So the reason you haven't seen anything is because it's just a much more difficult thing to do to challenge what Congress has declared, because it's just a harder, steeper proof burden.
There will always be rumblings from extreme groups that don't like whatever about current management. That'll always be out
Well, the
there.
litigation is a policy. It's just a practice
That's
now.
how they practice,
It's
so.
land management by litigation, and it's just something we have to live with. But the congressional designations are much more bulletproof than BLM's regulations.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. Our time is out. Thank you for joining the county seat. We'll look for you next time. And until then, get involved. Local government is where your life really takes place. We'll see you next time.